I am Audrey, and I'm approaching my late 30s. While my friends were getting married and starting families one by one, I remained single after breaking up with my college boyfriend. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't find a suitable partner, and I couldn't help but envy my friends who were happily married. During our girls' night out, my married friends often advised me to save money for myself while I was still single. They suggested having a separate savings account as a safety net, no matter what happened in the future. Although I didn't fully grasp the significance of this advice as a single woman, I diligently saved money and invested in stocks, building my financial security. Eventually, I decided it was time to settle down. Gabriel, who worked in sales for one of my business partners, and I had developed a close relationship through casual conversations. It didn't take long for us to decide to get married. My married life with him started peacefully, and I felt secure in his presence. While I initially felt a bit self-conscious about marrying in my late 30s, my husband was already in his 40s. I vowed to cherish our time together. However, this peaceful life didn't last long. The source of my troubles was my mother-in-law, Lai. When I first met her at the wedding, she greeted me with a polite tone but couldn't hide her sarcasm, commenting on my appearance and age. She asked probing questions about my marital history and children, making it clear she was critical of me. I was 37 at the time, and this was my first marriage. Lai's remarks stung, and I wondered how to respond. I also questioned my husband's lack of defense, as he couldn't stand up to his mother's behavior. Looking back, I realized that the strain in our relationship had likely been established long before I entered the picture. After the wedding, we moved in with my in-laws. My husband had always lived at home and financially supported his parents, so he insisted that I contribute after our marriage. I found it particularly challenging to support my in-laws, especially Lai, who had been critical since our first meeting. Her behavior only intensified once we started living together, and her constant sarcasm and harsh words began to wear on me. At first, I was hurt. But as the mistreatment continued, my frustration grew. Despite my anger, I didn't want to jeopardize my marriage, so I endured her bullying. Recently, however, my mother-in-law's mistreatment escalated beyond sarcasm to outright harassment. One morning, I noticed there wasn't enough breakfast for one more person at the dining table, and I inquired about it while she was in the kitchen cooking. "What's going on? Everyone is here today, and there's not enough food for one more person, right?" "Oh, that. I'm not fond of someone who doesn't take initiative. So, I didn't prepare anything for you even though you usually cook for us. After all, you're my daughter-in-law, aren't you? If that's the case, you should wake up early and make breakfast for everyone. How can you expect me to do it all by myself? From now on, you're on your own for meals. It should be easy since you only have to cook for yourself, right? I've been quite accommodating to you." My mother-in-law made these comments and continued to cook for my father-in-law and husband while ignoring me completely. She even went out of her way to prepare elaborate packed lunches for them despite her occasional harsh words. I convinced myself that my mother-in-law wasn't a bad person because she had been preparing meals for me. However, her mistreatment of me continued to escalate. One Sunday, she told me that she was meeting an old friend she was excited to see. When I woke up the next morning, she was already gone, and I couldn't help feeling relieved not to have her presence around. Given her constant unkindness, with just my husband and father-in-law at home, I prepared lunch for the three of us, uncertain when my mother-in-law would return. As the day went on and I hadn't heard from her by 4:00 p.m., I decided to make dinner only for those present and planned to prepare a meal for my mother-in-law when she returned later. But when my mother-in-law arrived home that evening, she seemed unusually cheerful. She happily explained, "I had so much fun today. It's wonderful to catch up with friends, don't you think? I even brought back souvenirs for everyone." However, her mood soured when she saw the dining table. "Did I ask you to prepare dinner?" she snapped. I stammered, explaining that I hadn't received any notice about her return and I thought she might be coming home late. I wanted to prepare dinner for her later. However, this only angered her more. She scolded me for having cooked dinner and for the quality of my food, calling it inedible. I watched in frustration as my husband and father-in-law emptied the meal we had laid out into the sink. As per my mother-in-law's orders, she insisted they dispose of it, even if it had yet to reach its expiration date. While I seethed with anger inside, I realized that it was futile to react at this point. So, I tried to contain my emotions and decided to eat my dinner alone at the kitchen table. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law continued to enjoy her meal at the dining table, blissfully discussing the delicacies she had bought from the department store and dishes from famous restaurants. She shared details about her shopping spree without noticing that my husband and father-in-law were growing disinterested. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for my mother-in-law as I listened to her from the kitchen. I was shocked when I noticed her outfit. "Isn't that the new dress I bought for our upcoming company trip?" I couldn't contain my surprise and rushed into the room. Lily, my mother-in-law, looked at me with a startled expression. "Isn't that my dress?" I asked incredulously, "Why are you wearing it?" She replied, "Oh, I wanted to wear a new dress for my friend's meetup. I searched around and found this one. I didn't know it was yours. I'm sorry." But I could tell it was a lie. She knew it was mine and had deliberately worn it without asking. I had been looking forward to wearing that new dress, and she took it from me so casually. What's more, the dress was a perfect fit for me. But it looked ill-fitted on her, revealing her flabby belly. It seemed like she was the type of person who didn't care much about what she wore, as long as she could wear it. I didn't know how others perceived her outside the house, but I couldn't forgive her for ruining my new dress. To make matters worse, the bag she was carrying was also mine. She used it to bring back souvenirs, and it was a branded bag I had cherished. How could she use someone else's property without permission? Did she have no common sense? "Was this bag yours too?" she asked. And when I confirmed it was, she said, "I see. I'm sorry." My anger toward my mother-in-law had already reached its peak. This wasn't the first time she had taken my personal belongings without permission. She had previously taken my watch, a gift from my mother, and even traveled with my father-in-law using a ticket I had intended to give to my parents as a present. There were numerous other incidents, and as I recalled them, I started to feel like I couldn't hold back any longer. I had tried to keep quiet and avoid causing trouble in our family, but now I had no choice but to confront her. "Aren't you being a bit too audacious today?" she remarked. "You're just living here, eating on our dime. So don't make a fuss when I borrow something from you. If you have a problem with me, you can leave any time you want." Those words were the breaking point for me. Yes, next week I'll get everything done. By next week, I decided. I took a long bath that day, cleansing myself both physically and mentally. The following week felt like an eternity as my mother-in-law continued to harass me. But I endured it, knowing that my liberation was approaching. I no longer felt any affection for my husband, who tried to put on a kind facade. My feelings toward him had turned cold, and I was surprised by the change in myself. But I couldn't bear to continue living like this. I yearned for freedom. Finally, the faithful Sunday arrived. My mother-in-law was happily humming while vacuuming the house. Little did she know that her happiness would soon come to an end. I had made arrangements for someone to visit in the afternoon, and when the doorbell rang, she was taken aback. I greeted the person and invited them inside. Now the counterattack begins. I thought to myself. My mother-in-law looked puzzled and asked, "What's all this about? You think he's an appraiser. But what is he going to sell?" I replied with determination. "The person I invited is an antique appraiser. I asked him to come today because there's something I want to have evaluated. I wanted to address something with Lily." "Lily, you mentioned that you lost the watch my mother gave me, right?" "I still haven't recovered it, but have you found it since then?" I asked my mother-in-law calmly. "Well, I haven't found it yet, but it's just a cheap watch you can buy anywhere, right? Why don't you simply purchase the same one again?" My mother-in-law remained nonchalant. However, that watch held great sentimental value. It was a memento from my grandmother and a luxury branded watch worth over $300,000. It was a limited edition from my grandmother's era and couldn't be replaced. My mother-in-law's face paled upon hearing this. My father-in-law chimed in, "I remember you saw a similar watch at an antique store, right? Is that the one?" My husband was puzzled. "You saw the heirloom at an antique store?" "No. It looked nice, so I thought I could use it to make some extra money. I intended to let them use it, but planned to buy it back when I could afford it. I didn't realize it was so old," my mother-in-law explained, transitioning from a facade of weakness to a condescending attitude towards me. If that was how she wanted to play it, I wouldn't back down. "Mr. Miller, what were the results of the watch appraisal I requested?" I pressed. "I'm not certain, but if it's a limited edition model from that year, it could be valued at no less than $200,000, conservatively speaking." The appraiser's verdict was crystal clear, and my mother-in-law was left dumbfounded. "What? What?" she exclaimed. "I can't believe you sold such a valuable item without permission," my husband added, finally recognizing my mother-in-law's habit of helping herself to my possessions. He had been aware of it, but had chosen to ignore it until now. Yet I couldn't forgive him for his indifference. But it was just a watch. I didn't have much. So if I could use it to raise some money, it would be my final act of filial piety. I said quietly, drawing attention to her misconduct, the last act. My husband was taken aback. "I feel sorry for you, even though it wasn't your fault. I no longer want to live with you, your parents, and your lack of support. I understand." My husband replied somberly, "I want a divorce too. You and your mother are strangers to me now." "What divorce? What do you mean?" My husband was deeply upset by the sudden declaration. "I'm sorry, but I've already made up my mind. This is final," I affirmed resolutely. My mother-in-law appeared unfazed, remaining seemingly unmoved even about selling the watch she audaciously suggested. "I can't believe that watch was worth so much. I wonder if I can buy it back now and sell it for even more." Her nerve to utter such words after everything astounded me. "You mentioned wanting a divorce, right? In that case, Could you provide us with more money for covering your living expenses? We've been taking care of you all this time," she continued. "Sure. No problem. Can I send it via check? How much do you need?" I responded promptly. My mother-in-law was taken aback by my willingness to comply. "A check. I don't care. How much is it? Assets. Where did you suddenly get all these assets?" she inquired. "That's not your concern. Thank you for your assistance. Goodbye," I declared, and with that, the appraiser and I promptly exited the house. I knew I would never step foot in that house again, and I felt a renewed sense of liberation. In the weeks since deciding to divorce, I had meticulously organized my personal belongings, as a friend can advise. Long ago, I had over $300,000 in assets from savings and stock investments, solely in my name, established before I got married. While common property is typically divided with the husband in a divorce, these assets would be handled differently. With this substantial amount of money, I have secured financial independence for the future. Even if I never marry again, I'm grateful that I heeded the advice to save money while single, a lesson I truly appreciate now. After going through marriage and divorce following a friend's guidance, I began investing in index funds, initially starting with a small amount, but eventually increasing it to $5,000 per month over the past 15 years. Since my days as a bachelor, my consistent investments in mutual funds have paid off handsomely, and I've amassed a significant fortune. My ex-husband and his family had no choice but to continue residing in the same house after I left. The rumors of my ex-mother-in-law's harassment and mistreatment of me spread throughout the neighborhood, causing her discontent as she lost favor among the community. My ex-husband was tagged as the man whose wife had run away shortly after marriage, primarily due to his inability to stand up to his parents and take care of his spouse. I believe he will likely continue to seek marriage, but I anticipate it will be challenging. Marriage should not be a mere goal, but a new chapter in life. I have strongly come to realize this. When I got married in my late 30s, I had envisioned a peaceful life ahead. Little did I know that my married life would be filled with such turmoil. Nevertheless, this experience has solidified my determination to find my true life partner, someone with whom I can weather both the highs and lows of life together. Until I encounter such a match someday, I am content to live independently. I will persist in steadily growing my assets to ensure a secure and self-reliant future.